Welcome back. A D.C. appeals court expected to make a decision over the pause on President Trump's criminal migrant deportation flights to El Salvador. One Obama-appointed judge says this: Nazis got better treatment than what has happened here. The judge also saying that illegals can still be detained under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, but they cannot be deported until the decision on a preliminary injunction to stop the removals plays out. House Speaker Mike Johnson meeting with the House Judiciary Committee today. They're expected to discuss plans that will counter the judges who are blocking the Trump agenda. House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan is planning a hearing early next week focused on those activist judges. He's also expecting a House-wide vote on a bill which is looking to block the district judges from issuing nationwide injunctions. Joining me now is Texas Congressman and House Judiciary Committee member Brandon Gill. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. You've been talking about impeachment of these judges. You filed impeachment articles against Judge James Boasberg. Now you're teaming up with America First Legal and filing an amicus brief to challenge his decision to block Trump's deportation flights. Tell us where you are on this.
Thanks for having me on. Yes, listen, Judge Boasberg's ruling was unconstitutional and lawless. He is usurping the power of the president, acting as commander-in-chief, to conduct our foreign policy and to repel an invasion. These are powers that are non-justiciable, meaning powers that are not subject to judicial review. The court has no jurisdiction. This is a lawless ruling, and we're not going to allow activist judges to usurp the president's power and abuse their authority. So I filed articles of impeachment last week, and I'm pushing forward hard on them.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've already heard from the Supreme Court where they said impeachment is not appropriate in this situation, right? So, I mean, do you think the Supreme Court is going to come up with something different?
Well, I would love to see the Supreme Court step in quickly. I think the key point here is we've got to move fast. What these judges are doing by tying the president's hand in litigation is effectively nullifying the results of the 2024 election. Activist judges know that if they can make this appeals process last months or even years, whether they win on appeal or not, it doesn't matter. They've already won because they burned valuable time from the Trump presidency. In other words, the process itself is the judicial coup. The process is the punishment, and that's why we've got to act fast. I hope that the Supreme Court steps in and expedites this appeals process, but absent that, I think Congress needs to jump in here. We cannot allow rogue activist judges to conduct our foreign policy or to usurp the president's authority. That's wrong. It's not what voters voted for, and it undermines our constitutional republic.
Yep. Meanwhile, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, announcing results of a massive operation around Boston. 370 total arrests, 205 of which had significant criminal convictions or charges. 6 of those people were foreign fugitives. Officials also seized 11 pounds of fentanyl. That was enough to kill more than 2 million people. Some of those arrests included a Chilean national convicted of an assault of a minor, a Brazilian national wanted for murder, and a Honduran national convicted of child rape. These were all, quote-unquote, at-large arrests, meaning they were on the streets before officials found them. Border czar Tom Homan writes this: these officers and agents made the neighborhoods of Boston and Massachusetts much safer. They risked their own safety by arresting these criminals on the street rather than in jail. Governor Healy and Mayor Wu should be ashamed of supporting sanctuary policies. Congressman, you know, it's a situation where you've got these judges trying to stop President Trump, and yet the whole issue at hand, which President Trump is trying to execute here, is supposed to help the people. I spoke with the New York Police Commissioner on Sunday, Jessica Tisch, and here's a situation in New York where it looks like New York is helping ICE and ensuring that they work together to get the bad guys off the streets. Watch this.
There's a number of factors that I believe have gone into the record crime declines that we're seeing. Among them, we create zones in the city where we see pockets of violence and disorder, and we flood those zones with cops. New York City and the NYPD have long-standing partnerships with the Department of Homeland Security, with the FBI, with the DEA, task forces that we staff with NYPD cops where we go after criminals regardless of immigration status. I would would say that under President Trump, that work has been beefed up to really focus on those task forces on going after criminals.
Because the migrant arrests are down, right?
I can't give you a number of how many migrants have been arrested in the past or arrested today. It's not something that we track under the laws in New York City.
Congressman, your thoughts? This is not the case in Boston, that's for sure. And I do believe migrant arrests are down. So it's partly what they're doing in New York, but it's also partly what President Trump has done. Let's be honest.
Exactly. And what President Trump and Tom Homan are doing by cleaning up our communities and getting murderers and rapists who have no business being in our country to begin with. They have no claim to our resources whatsoever. President Trump is doing God's work here, but it speaks to a much more fundamental issue, I think, as it relates to sanctuary city mayors and other jurisdictions that are harboring criminal illegal aliens, which is who do these elected representatives actually represent? Do they represent the citizens of the United States, or do they represent illegal alien thugs who have no business being here in the first place? And I think too often, sanctuary city mayors want to represent these criminals at the expense of their own voters and at the expense of the American people. That is wrong. These people are murdering and raping and pillaging American citizens. They've got to go.
All right. I want to get to the next subject, but before I do, what's your timing on these articles of impeachment? I mean, you're losing time every day. You know that. You've got prisoners and criminals now in America arrested, and you can't send them back.
Yes, I think we need to move as fast as possible. Now, there are a variety of options on the table, and impeachment is one of them. We're going to have a hearing next week going after and exposing some of these judges, but there are other options as well. We can limit circuit court jurisdiction. We can defund these courts outright. We can impeach some of the most rogue and egregious judges like Judge Boasberg. So we're going to be looking at all options, and we are right now.
Real quick, congressional Republicans working on the budget reconciliation. House Ways and Means Committee member Greg Murphy told me yesterday they're currently writing the tax portion of this bill. But the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would add $37 trillion to the debt over the next 30 years. And they're recommending lawmakers limit extensions to the most important and pro-growth elements of this tax code. Bottom line, Congressman, you're on the House Budget Committee. You've got to come up with offsets to ensure these tax cuts get through. Where are you on this?
Well, you're exactly right. Whenever many of these agencies look at the impact on the debt long term, they look at the tax cut extensions in a vacuum. And that's not how this is being done. These are being done statutorily in conjunction with spending cuts. But there are a couple problems with their numbers. One is that the CBO chronically underreports the expected pro-growth aspects of tax cuts. In other words, their dynamic scoring undercounts the amount of GDP growth we expect to see from tax cuts. But secondly, they don't take into account the spending cuts. And we have to have spending cuts statutorily for these tax cuts to go through as part of reconciliation.
It's true. The president always reiterates that as well. Don't forget growth. You've got to put that into your scoring as well. Congressman, we'll be watching your work on this. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.